Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna.
Hare Krishna devotees, Dandavat Pranam. Welcome to Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Today we are fortunate to have the association of His Grace Sri Bhagavat Prabhu, who will be sharing the nectar from Srimad Bhagavatam from Canto 4, chapter number 29, title Talks Between Nārada and King Prācīnabarhi, sloka number 3 and 4. Hare Krishna Prabhuji, over to you Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you very much. Hare Krishna, firstly I welcome everyone, all devotees, and thanks Sankarshan Priya Prabhu for giving this opportunity to help me read and relish Srimad Bhagavatam for my purification. So I will be requesting to all the assembled Vaishnavas to bless me so that I speak proper words. And we will be reading verses number 3 and 4 from chapter 29, 4th canto. So first I'll begin with Vaishnava Pranams. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurulmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Katamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapatakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Satvaitam Savrupam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Sha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Pancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Tatha Kantan Bhakta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Pranamami Hari Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaura Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Once again, I seek the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas. I will be speaking from whatever I have read and heard from various senior devotees and from, of course, from Prabhupada books. So I'll be sharing the verses that we'll be reading for today. So we have started the 29th chapter. So we'll be reading verse number 3rd and 4th. First, I'll read the verses 3rd, 4th, their translation. Then I will take the purport individually for each of these verses, and I'll share and points that I wanted to from whatever I heard and read from other devotees. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yo avignata hritastasya purushasya sakheshvaraha yanna vignayate pumbhir namabhirva kriya gunaihi. Yo avignata hritastasya purushasya sakheshvaraha yanna vignayate pumbhir namabhirva kriya gunaihi. Yo avignata hritastasya Purushasya Sakheshvaraha yanna vignayate pumbhir nama bhirva kriya gunaihi. Yeah, word to word meanings. Yeah, he who. Avignata, unknown. Ahritaha, described. Tasya, of him. Purushasya, of the living entity. Sakha, the eternal friend. Ishvaraha, the master. Yat, because. Na, never. Vignayate is understood. Pumbhihi, by the living entities. Nama bihi, by names. Va, or kriya gunaihi, by activities or qualities. Translation. The person I have described as unknown is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master and eternal friend of the living entity. Since the living entities cannot realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by material names, activities, or qualities, he remains everlastingly unknown to the conditioned soul. I'll read the 4th verse, the synonyms and the translation. Yada jigrikshan purushaha katsnyena prakriter gunan navadvaram dvihastangri tatram manuta sadavaiti. Yada jigrikshan purushaha karsnena prakriter gunan navadvaram vihastangri tatra manuta sadhavaiti. Yada jigrikshan purushaha karsnena prakriter gunan navadvaram vihastangri tatra manuta sadhavaiti. Synonyms. Yada, when. Jigrikshan, desiring to enjoy. Purushaha, the living entity. Katsnena, in total. Prakrite, of material nature. Gunan, the modes. Navadvaram, having 9 gates. Dvi, 2. Hasta, hands. Angri, legs. Tatra, there. Amanuta, he thought. Sadhu, very good. Iti, thus. Translation. When the living entity wants to enjoy the modes of material nature in their totality, he prefers out of many bodily forms to accept that body which has 9 gates, 2 hands, and 2 legs. Thus, he prefers to become a human being or a demigod. So, Hare Krishna. So, we will continue the discussion of this chapter. So, we just recollect, we have just started. So, what is happening here? In the earlier chapters, Prācīnabarhi, who was an expert, Karmakanda Nishnata, who was expert in performing fruitive activities out of causeless mercy, Nārada Muni approached Prācīnabarhi and was showing his supreme compassion and mercy, was explaining to him about the impending dangers that are about to come to him in the form of an allegorical story. Now, after having said that story, it was many chapters, and for many months we have read. For us, it was months, but the chapter was very elaborate. I mean, or the description of that story was elaborate. We see that in this chapter, it begins with Prācīnabarhi asking Nārada Muni, oh dear Supreme Nārada or Nārada Muni, you have explained that allegorical story, but he says, the word he uses is nasamyag avagamyate. Like it is maybe easy for people who are advanced in spiritual knowledge to understand, but for people like me who are completely engrossed in material activities, it's very difficult to understand. So what we can understand is, previously the Puranjana, as we have been hearing a lot and many times, was representing a living entity who was in search for happiness and who is bound by the network of desires. And similarly, Prācīnabarhi now was previously also Prutu worker. Now he is representing a sadhaka, because we see that he is, by the causeless mercy of the Lord, he was approached by the supreme devotee of the Lord, and he has, by good fortune, the association of the devotee of the Lord, pure devotee of the Lord. Now he is starting to take the role of a sadhaka, just like us. We have heard, by the causeless mercy of the Lord, we have received a pure devotee or some devotee who have come into our lives and helped us understand this science of spiritual knowledge. So it's not that once we have heard, we were able to completely give up everything or completely convince and attain pure devotion. It's possible, but in general, in normal situations, normal circumstances, it's not the case. So that's why Prācīnabarhi in that sense represent the sadhaka who has understood the knowledge, but who is yet to understand it or realize it completely. So that's why he is asking for more explanation. And we can also understand that the pure devotee, we can see from here, the pure devotee's main business is to pull out the conditioned souls from the material misery. And actually, the Lord is also concerned about the condition of the living entities in this material world. So he's always eager to pull them out, and his via medium is the pure devotees. So to the degree one is pure in one's sadhana and spiritual practices, to that degree the Lord engages in that person in this very important service of the Lord. So as we discussed, there was so much elaborate explanations given. Still, Prācīnabarhi is raising this question, which is leading to this conversation with Nārada Muni and Prācīnabarhi, which is nothing but a disciple seeking further clarities and explanations from the spiritual master, and the spiritual master giving valid instructions and pertinent and timely and also relevant instructions, so that and practical as well, so that the disciple can work upon them and achieve perfection. So yes, the point to conclude here is, so we were lucky enough to have the purpose of Srila Prabhupada for the entirety of that Puranjana story, and also many wonderful devotees have given very elaborate points explaining those conversations. So we were able to clearly understand, but of course, many of us, at least me, still are not able to get that pure devotion. That's because we will get to know, because that's what the conversation is about. Why that even in spite of hearing, why does the living entity doesn't still attain perfection? So that's why we see the importance of the pure devotee and the explanations of the pure devotee. We see here very much explained here. So I'll read the purport a little bit, and we will discuss a few more points from the purport as we go along. So we're reading the purport for this third verse. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unknown to the conditioned soul, he is sometimes described in Vedic literatures as Nirakara, Abhignata, or Avan Manasa Gochara. Actually, it is a fact that the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be perceived by material senses as far as his form, name, quality, pastimes, or paraphernalia are concerned. However, when one is spiritually advanced, one can understand the name, form, qualities, pastimes, and paraphernalia of the Supreme Lord. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 18.55. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi chashmi tatvataha. One can understand in truth the Supreme Personality of Godhead only when one is engaged in devotional service. Ordinary persons engaged in pious and impious activities cannot understand the form, name, and activities of the Lord. The devotee, however, can know the personality of Godhead in many respects. He can understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that his address is Goloka Vrindavan, and that his activities are all spiritual. Because the Lord's form and activities cannot be understood by materialistic people, he is described by the Shastras as Nirakara, that is, one whose form cannot be ascertained by a materialistic person. This does not mean that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has no form. It means that it is not understood by the karmis or fruitive actors. His form is described in Brahma Samhita Satchidananda Vigraha. So what we see here is also just a little bit, few points that we can discuss. How Nārada Muni is starting to explain. So here, so we can see in the few verses that are going to come, Nārada Muni is giving the Sambandha Jnana. Sambandha Jnana is basically the helping one understand one's true identity and one's relationship with the God and who the God is. And then comes the Abhidheya Jnana, how to develop that relation. And finally, the Prayojana, the fulfillment of all this knowledge is to attain the pure devotion of the Lord, love of Godhead, or pure love for Krishna. So here he is also explaining, introducing the God, because previously in the previous verse he introduced the kind of the living entities. He introduced the topic. So how is he introducing? He's not telling the Lord as something impersonal. He's directly to the point. He's saying Purushasya Sakeshwaraha. So who is he? He's a person, Purushasya. And what are the qualities of that person? Sakha Ishwara. He is the friend and Ishwara. So it is translated as the master and eternal friend. So we know Bhuktaram Yagna Tapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suhridam Sarvabhutanam Gnatmama Shantim Richam. So unless one understands this fact about God and one's relationship with God, one cannot be happy. So this same fact is being repeated here. And it is also mentioned in the first part of the purport that we read, that Lord is addressed as Nirakara, Nirguna. So it is also said Nirguna. It doesn't mean that the Lord does not have any form or it does not have any qualities. Prabhupada is clearly saying in the purport that the qualities and the form are to be understood only by a person who is a pure devotee of the Lord. And he knows so much that he knows the address of the Lord, where he stays, what does he do. So unless one is a pure devotee, one cannot understand. And how does that understanding begin is further explained in these verses. And we can, to just understand this point a little bit in detail, we can also see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Naham Prakasha Sarvasya. He is not revealed to everyone. He's covered by the curtain of Maya. So he's covered, to whom he is covered? He's covered to the Naradhama, the people who are lowest of the mankind, who are atheists, who are engrossed in fruitive mentality. For them, he's never revealed. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita also, few examples we can understand just to see the contrast between these three persons who are interacting with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is none other than Krishna himself. So first we see in the Balya Leela, where there's a personality called Keshav Kashmiri or Digvijay Pandit, who is at that time supposed to be the most learned scholar, and he was touring all the places across the country, and he was defeating all the scholars. And at that time, Navadip was considered to be the seat of Vedic scholarship or Vedic literatures, or it's supposed to be the place where the greatest of the great scholars were there. So he comes there. So and he presents himself before the Lord as a Pandita. So a Pandita, we see what actually Pandita means. Vidya Vinaya Sammanne Brahmane Grihastini. Sunichaiva Sopakecha Pandita Samadarshana. So the real meaning of a Pandita is one who sees everyone and one who sees the divinity in everyone, and one who becomes humble by seeing the divinity. Is just not seeing, there's also an action. He becomes humble. But here we see that this Keshav Kashmiri, whose title was Digvijay Pandit, he posed himself before the Lord as a great scholar. And he actually believed, and it's not that, and even in face to face with the Lord, he believed that he's a kid, he's a small child. What can he debate with me? And he also insults the Lord. You are considered to be the great scholar. I understand why people consider, because you are teaching to small kids, and for teaching small kids, you don't need much of greater proficiency in the literature. So as we know, the Keshav Kashmiri invites the Lord to engage in a debate. So the Lord asks to compose him a poem on the Ganges, and within like as it said, like a speed of the wind, he composes 100 verses about Ganges, and he recites them. And once he recites, to his astonishment, the Lord first congratulates him for composing so many verses on the fly. But he says that in the 64th verse, I see there are 5 good qualities, but there are also 5 faults. So to this, the Keshav Kashmiri is astounded. How can someone who is I've spoken this 100 verses at the speed of wind, and he was able to recollect the verse number, and is also able to point out the flaws. So it's the point here is, even while this conversation is happening, the Lord didn't reveal, and he is not able to understand that he is the Lord himself. It's only when out of humility, being lost in the debate, and out of dejection, out of loss of pride, when he goes back and he sleeps in the night, Goddess Saraswati, who always dances on his tongue, reveals to him that he is none other than the Supreme Personality of God. So we see that, so it's not the purport many places mentioned, and it's mentioned in Bhagavatam also. It's not that one by erudite scholarship or learned, one who is learned in various scriptures, one can understand the Lord. It's not possible. And also on the other side, we also see, so it's both, because it's mentioned, especially in the later part of the purport, and also in the next purport, and one who is a fruitive actor and one who is a mental speculator cannot understand. And the example of mental speculator basically means the Mayavadi or the Jnana Vadis is Prakashananda Saraswati. He also, though he was very particularly respectful to the Lord, he couldn't understand. When the Lord was present with him, he was kind of taken back by the effulgence of the Lord. He was attracted, but he still considered the Lord, he showed mercy on the Lord, in the sense that, oh, he's such a young sannyasi, he's effulgent, he must be practicing his vows very nicely, he has very humble nature, but he's not learned. He has to be taught very well in the Vedanta philosophy. He's just simply sentimentally chanting the holy names of the Lord. But we see the conversations that we have wherein Lord completely kind of puts aside the philosophy of Mayavadis and puts his argument of how the Lord is not impersonal, and he takes an humble position and says, my dear, my spiritual master told that I'm a fool, I cannot understand these great Vedantic scriptures. All I need to do is chant the names of the Lord and I will attain perfection. So the same thing is mentioned, it's here in the purport, as confirmed by the Parabha Purana, Athak Sri Krishna Namadi Nabhaved Graham Indriyahi Sevan Mukhehi Jivadav Swayam Eva Spurati Ada. So no one can understand Krishna as he is by utilizing the blunt material senses. However, the Lord reveals himself to his devotees, being pleased with them because of their transcendental loving service rendered unto him. So further, in this purport, we'll quickly read the purport and discuss few more points that we have already seen. And then just a couple of points on this Sevan Mukhoihi Jivado. So the beginning of devotional service. So we just re-emphasized or re-understood the well-known fact that it's through devotional service that one can understand. And the beginning of the devotional service is one through chanting, and also by following and serving the instructions of the pure devotee of the Lord. So we know that Yasya Prasadat Bhagavad Prasad. So, and who is that Vande Guru? Who is that? Why that Guru is special? Because it's mentioned in the Bhagavatam, Yatha Krishnarpita Pranas. This Guru is not. It's not that to anyone, any Guru, when we render service, we'll be able to get this devotion or able to understand the nuances of devotional service. It's to that person who has surrendered his life in service of the Lord or for the pleasure of the Lord. Yatha Krishnarpita Pranas Tat Purusha Nishevaya. So one, it's not one who serves that person, serves the instruction, will be able to attain pure devotional service, and will be able to completely understand the Lord. The same fact is also, as we will continue to read this chapter, it's basically in one way interaction or a conversation between a guru and a disciple, where Nārada Muni explains the philosophy of soul, the philosophy of karma. He explains the dangers of being in the material world, and finally instructs him on what his immediate duty is and what he should do. So we'll read the remaining part of the purport. Since the name, form, qualities, and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, cannot be understood by the material senses, he is also called Adokshaja, meaning beyond sense perception. When the senses are purified by devotional activity, the devotee understands everything about the Lord by the Lord's grace. In this verse, the words Kumbhir, Namabhir, Vakriya Gunai especially significant, because God, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has many names, activities, and qualities, although none of them are material. Despite the fact that all these names, activities, and pastimes are mentioned in the Shastras and understood by the devotees, the karmis, future laborers, cannot understand them, nor can the jnanis, mental speculators understand them. Although there are thousands of names of Lord Vishnu, the karmis and jnanis intermingle the names of the Supreme Godhead with the names of demigods and human beings. Because they cannot understand the actual name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they take it for granted that any name can be accepted. They believe that since the absolute truth is impersonal, they can call him by any name. Otherwise, they maintain he has no name. This is not a fact. Here it is clearly stated, Nama Birva Kriya Gune. The Lord has specific names such as Rama, Krishna, Govinda, Narayana, Vishnu, and Adokshaja. There are indeed many names, but the conditioned soul cannot understand them. So herein, the point here is, the Lord's names are not material. The Lord's name indicate the Lord's spiritual opulence. There is Jnanam, there is Vijnanam. In 9th chapter, 2nd verse of Bhagavad Gita, Raja Vidya Raja Gyuhyam, Pavitramidam Uttamam. In that verse, Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam. So it is said that one can understand through devotional service both Jnanam and Vijnanam. So Jnanam, as I was hearing, is knowledge, and Vijnanam is scientific knowledge or realized knowledge. Or devotees, I was hearing devotees were sharing that Vijnanam means understanding the spiritual opulence of the Lord. Jnanam is to understand the general the opulence that is more of in awe and reverence, but to understand the activities of the Lord, the dealings of the Lord with his devotees, and how the devotional service is so sweet and supremely opulent, that is Vijnanam. So here Prabhupada is mentioning the fact that when one cannot understand the Lord himself, how can one understand the names? Then naturally one consider the names as mundane. Basically, the whole point in this purport Prabhupada is pointing to, which he points elsewhere also, that when the Lord comes here and he appears as the son of Nanda Maharaj or son of Yashoda or Devaki, that is not a material relationship. It is a spiritual relationship. Or when he does some activities, when he crawls, it's not like a mundane activity. It's not a mundane relationship. It is an ever-existing relationship that is beyond the body, which basically means the relationship that the Lord exhibits when he comes and performs his Leela are not mundane, and they're beyond the bodily perception. They're spiritual. So that is what we need to understand and re-understand in one sense. And also one point would like to share, which a very, very practical point Prabhupada mentions, how to understand that the Lord's name is not material. See, we can, we played this class in one of our Wednesdays. So Prabhupada mentions that just like when you call a person, you talk to a person, right? And then the moment you call and talk to that person, you are in direct contact with that person. So similarly, when you are calling Krishna, you're in direct contact with the Lord, who is away, very much away, somewhere in the spiritual, in the Goloka Vrindavan, who is who is along with his most confidential devotees. You are in direct contact with that Lord when you are chanting Hare Krishna. So it's very simple. It may the logic is simple, but it's very hard to understand for a non-devotee who has not chanted the names of the Lord, or who has not chanted these names by accepting as a diksha in the form of a diksha, or who is not rendering service to the confidential devotee of the Lord. So these are some of the points that we could understand. Essentially, just a brief recap, because what is being mentioned, as we just understood, is the Sambandha Jnana. Nārada Muni is talking about Sambandha Jnana, is introducing the Lord and the Lord's qualities, his potencies, and how to approach the Lord. So then, if we just emphasize one point here, because that is the link between the verse 3 and of course the following verses. Yo avignana arhata o avignata hritastasya yanna vignayate. Not known, one who is not known. Because this not known person, if you recollect in the Puranjana pastime, when the daughter of Vidarbha king Vaidarbhi is when Puranjana, when the king Malayadvaja dies, she is all crying. Then one unknown person appears. So now Nārada Muni is saying that unknown person is none other than the Supreme Personality, who is always with us, trying to guide the soul in the right direction, who is always caring for the welfare of the soul. That unknown person, who in spite of standing before this soul, is unable to understand that he is the unknown. And why that forgetfulness is there, that the whole next upcoming verses emphasize this point on why there is the forgetfulness on the part of the living entity, in spite of the Lord being so near, but yet the Lord seems to be so far. So we read the slokam and the verse and the translation. So in this purport, Prabhupada is he's mentioning how like when the living entity wants to enjoy the modes of material nature in their totality, he prefers to, out of many bodily forms, to accept the human form. So the importance of human form and what the human form offers is the essence of this verse. So this is a very nice explanation of how the spiritual being, the part and parcel of Krishna, God, accepts a material body by virtue of his own desires. So accepting 2 hands, 2 legs, and so on, the living entity fully enjoys the modes of material nature. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Ichhadvesha samuthena dvandamohena bharata sarva bhutani sammoham sadge yanti parantapa. So sign of Bharata, conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, overcome by the dualities of desire and hate. Originally, the living entity is a spiritual being, but when he actually desires to enjoy this material world, he comes down. So from this verse, we can understand that the living entity first accepts a body that is human in form, but gradually, due to his degraded activities, he falls into lower forms of life, into the animal, plant, and aquatic forms. By the gradual process of evolution, the living entity again attains the body of a human being and is given another chance to get out of the process of transmigration. If he again misses his chance in the human form to understand his position, he is again placed in the cycle of birth and death in various types of bodies. So going further, the desire of the living entity to come into the material world is not very difficult to understand. So what is the desire? To enjoy separately from the Lord. Although one may be born in a family of Aryans where there are restrictions against meat eating, intoxication, gambling, and illicit sex, still one may want to enjoy these forbidden things. There is always someone who wants to go to a prostitute for illicit sex, to a hotel to eat meat and drink wine, or to a gambling club to enjoy so-called sports. All these propensities are already within the heart of the living entities. Loke vayaya amisa madhya seva nityahi janto vyayavaya amisa. But some living entities stop to enjoy these abominable activities and consequently fall down to a degraded platform. The more one desires a degraded life within his heart, the more he falls down to occupy different forms of abominable existence. This is a process of transmigration and evolution. A particular type of animal may have a strong tendency to enjoy one kind of sense enjoyment, but in human form, one can enjoy all the senses. The human form has the facility to utilize all the senses for gratification. So unless one is properly trained, he becomes a victim of the modes of material nature. So what is that we are seeing here? So we can see here, Prabhupada is mentioning the mentality for enjoyment is accommodated by different types of bodies. There are 3 points of mentioned here. One, this verse to Nārada Muni through this verse is saying that originally how the spiritual spark, the living entity, how he comes into this material world. So I've also heard like somewhere once, like I'm not sure about the Shastric reference, that when the living entity comes into the material world, he becomes first the Brahma, and from there on he kind of falls down into the various species. So it's also mentioned here, it is mentioned as 2 hands and 2 legs. So he prefers to become a human being or demigod. So when the living entity wants to enjoy the modes of material nature in their totality. So 3 points. One is the living entity, when he wants to come to the material world, he comes through the medium of a body of a human being or a demigod. Second, the human body offers the facilities for sense gratification to the fullest possible extent, and it is also the juncture where one can either fall down into the most abominable species or one can elevate oneself. So again, perfectly, as we said, it's like a science of self-realization 6-session course for Prācīnabarhi. So what we gradually understand, in those sessions Nārada Muni is mentioning here. So we know that that there is this verse, Jalajanavalakani, like 8.4 million species, right? Like that in Padma Puran, that verse is mentioned where there are 8.4 million species, and the living entity can. Here there is a prerogative will and there is a forced choice. So here, if we carefully read the verse, he prefers, the preference is at the beginning, but once the living entity misutilizes the intelligence, the free will, and also utilizes the facilities, there is no choice. It is only by force. By force in the sense, by the force is through the manifestation of one's karma and one's desires. So both of these manifest, and in the form of the material nature, forces one to take up different bodies. So here, that's why also the famous verse one just referred to is Prahlad Maharaj mentions Dullabam Manusha Janma. Kaumaram, that's why Kaumaram Acharet Pragna, and Prabhupada also mentions, like, unless one is properly trained, one cannot control the desires, because it's like another key point is mentioned is there are actually the desires are there in the living entity, right? Because the desire is there, that's why he has come to the material world. And even in that sloka, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Vishya vinivartante niraharasya dehina. The desires are already there. One may try to refrain from sense enjoyment, but unless one develops a highest taste, one will eventually give up to the desires, because the will of the desires is so strong. And then in the same chapter, Krishna says that if if one of the roaming senses is captured by the sense object, just like how the boat is swept away by the wind, the living entity is carried away into this network of desire. So it's like the core point here is also mentioned is the desires, one cannot curb their desires, but the desires have to be dovetailed, or they have to be given a higher taste. And Prahlad Maharaj also mentions this, right? Kaumara acharech pragno, durlabham manasham dharma janma. So the human body is most rarely achieved, and although temporarily, like other bodies, it's not like permanent, but it is meaningful, because in human life one can perform devotional service, and even a slight amount of devotional service, one can achieve complete perfection. So we'll continue further in this purport. Prabhupada is mentioning in this second and the third para rather, how the living entity who is having this taste for desires is being carried into many living bodies, like for different bodies. This fall down, how it happens, is clearly explained in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, like where Krishna explains the divine and the demoniac natures. So actually here also it's mentioned that the living entity is that unknown person is not to be known by the living entity. He forgets that person even though he comes in front of this living entity. That's because that's the nature. Krishna says that the nature of forgetfulness of the Lord is nothing but a demonic quality. In 16th chapter, where Krishna explains there are divine and demonic natures. So divine nature means accepting the authority of the Lord and submitting to the order of the Lord. Whereas demoniac nature, the moment there is forgetfulness of the Lord, means it is a demoniac nature, as simple as that. It doesn't mean that one has different bodily features, but forgetfulness of the Lord equal to demoniac quality. So further, where it is explained why this demoniac quality comes, because the demonic quality arises from asatyam, like thinking. The demonic quality comes from the nature that considering the truth to be the false to be real, the untruth to be truth, asatyam to satyam, asatyam aprastishtam anishwaram, because they consider this there is nothing beyond sense gratification. The only thing that is existing is for the only thing that is there is for us to enjoy, and everything that is existing is for our happiness. So with this mentality, the demonic nature continues. The demonic nature progresses. So further, the Lord explains, because there is so much of this demonic nature in the heart, that person, the living entity, takes shelter of the insatiable lust, which is never satisfied. So, and he starts to find happiness elsewhere. Like the example is given later on also, wherein there is a deer who is too much attached, who is enjoying. So there is a deer who is looking for water, who is looking for water in green instead of looking for fresh water in areas where there is green vegetation. He's looking for water in elsewhere. We have also heard this example of trying to find happiness in or trying to look for that mirage of water in trying to look for water and considering the mirage in the desert as the real water. So trying to look for happiness in one place and trying to looking or rather to be in other words, to rephrase it, looking for happiness in a wrong place is the cause for the misery of the living entity. So further, it is said that when the living entity is looking for happiness, he tries to carry the burden of material existence, and in order to find happiness, he just carries different burdens of material existence in the form of different bodies. But ultimately, the happiness is never to be seen. Here I can see that there is a nice analogy given by Nārada Muni to Prācīnabarhi. The position of the living entity who's trying to enjoy in this material world is like that deer who is eating a grass, considering that he's enjoying, but there is a hunter behind him trying to shoot the deer, and there is a hungry tiger who is about to pounce upon the deer. So in this condition, the living entity is not able to understand the danger, the imminent danger that is in front of it. So this is so in this way we can understand how, like, when one is bound by the network of desires, he's just there is no way out. He's just trapped in one body of the other. And then Krishna says that this network of desires leads one to the hell. And as it's mentioned here, Krishna forces, like he puts the living entity into most abominable species, and makes them forget. So it's almost like punishment given to the living entity, that because of his so-called nature to enjoy material happiness, he is almost forced to forget the Lord. So then we may have one question. So how can we, because in the purport it is said that how can one properly, unless one is properly trained, he becomes victim of the modes of material nature. So how one can properly train oneself? So I have seen one example in Chaitanya Charitamrita that I want to relate. So there are three aspects that in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami says that one can take shelter of to be really relieved of these desires, and also helping the desires develop a higher taste. So he says the dust of the feet of a devotee, the water that has washed the feet of a devotee, and the remnants of the food left by a devotee are three very powerful substances. So in that context, he shares to make that illustrated point, he shares the pastime of one devotee, Kalidas, with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in that pastime, he says that the remnants of food offered to Lord Krishna are called Mahaprasad. And after the same Mahaprasad has been taken by a pure devotee of the Lord, the remnants are elevated to Mahaprasad. So what he says there, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami, is if one wants to achieve the highest goal of life, if one wants to dovetail or develop a higher taste, he says, I insist again and again, take shelter of these three things: the dust of the dust of the feet of a devotee, and the water that has washed the feet of a devotee, and the remnants of the food taken by a devotee. So this Kalidas, who happens to visit Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he was in Jagannath Puri, he, like every year during the Chaturmasa period, and also coinciding with the Ratha Yatra, the devotees from Bengal used to visit Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So along with that group of devotees, this Kalidasa, who also happens to be the uncle of Raghunath Das Goswami, he comes to meet Mahaprabhu because his long desire was to meet Mahaprabhu. And in introduction of this character, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami says that this person is he's a Mahabhagavat devotee who's always engaged in chanting of the names of the Lord, and he would always taste the remnants of the Vaishnavas, whether he would be a neophyte or a Madhyamadhikari or Uttamadhikari, or he be from a Brahmana family or a Shudra family. If he is a devotee, he would chant the names, he would go and eat the remnants. He would always hanker to eat the remnants of the devotee. In fact, if the devotees, knowing that in the town that where he used to be, knowing that he would always hanker for the remnants of the food, the devotees would hide, because they would not like this devotee, who all considered him to be a highly advanced devotee, to eat their remnants. They would hide. So hide the food, hide the remnants, so that he would not get it. And when they would throw the remainings, like it's mentioned that when they would eat the mango, they would chew the mango skin and also the seed and throw it out. Kalidas used to hide and collect that, especially from the great devotees in the town. He would collect that and chew upon them, and he would consider that as his perfection of life. So when this devotee, and not just consider a perfection, he firmly believed that that was the essence. That's where the lot of spiritual potency was there. And when he went to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu always used to wash his feet when he used to visit Lord Jagannath. And when he washes his feet, he would never allow anyone to touch that water. But he allowed this Kalidas to drink that water. and also gave him the remnants of his footsteps because of his unflinching faith in the Mahaprasadam and all these three aspects, the dust and the water that washes the feet of the Lord. So we also see Bhakti Vinod Thakur says, Shuddha Bhagata Charananenu Bhakati Anukula. So the dust of the lotus feet and the Mahaprasadam, the Mahaprasadam, and the water that washes. So there are many examples, like Uddhava says that in Bhagavatam that he wants to be a Kulmalata, so that he can be trampled by the gopis, and the dust from the lotus feet can touch upon him, and he can get a pure devotion to Lord, and his all his desires are dovetailed. Likewise, there is one example, which is quite an elaborate example elaborate incident in Ramanujacharya's pastime. Also, there is one disciple of his who is very pure, and Ramanujacharya goes and meets him. So they are so pure that they can't afford him prasadam. And the wife of that devotee in the town, there was a merchant who kind of has a bad, he has an ill desire towards her, and he wants to enjoy her. And at that point, when there is nothing to serve their guru, she goes and approaches him and says, "Today you can enjoy me, but please give me all the facilities so that I can prepare food for my Gurudev." And when later on, when Ramanujacharya and her husband comes to know about it, Ramanujacharya says, "Don't worry, you eat, you serve me bhoga or prasadam offered to the Lord, and give the Mahaprasadam to that merchant." And once upon eating the Mahaprasadam left by Ramanujacharya, his heart changes and he falls down at the feet of that mother whom earlier he wants to enjoy. So there are so many examples of these things that I could think of what it means to be properly trained on a daily basis to overcome this network of desires and enjoyment. And then, of course, we will also hear in further verses to come what it means to train oneself, as we already said multiple times in this discussion. This is a discussion between Guru and his disciple, and the Guru instructing the disciple how to practice devotional service. So with this, I'll conclude. So we discussed a few key points. One is the understanding of the Lord, how one can understand the Lord, what are the pitfalls in understanding the Lord, and the transmigration of the living entity, the reasons for the transmigration. It is the desires. So the living entity always has desires, and then it's the dovetailing the desires, or helping the desires taste, giving the desires a higher taste is the only way. And that giving the higher taste that I could, because I was reading recently. So this example of Kalidasa seemed very apt. So with this, I'll conclude the class. So devotees can share any comments or anything, any corrections or any questions which I can answer. I'll try to do that.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavad Pranam. Thank you for very nice class, Prabhuji. I think couple of takeaway is that, for me at least, one is that the beginning of devotional service is by serving the devotees, and we should take all the opportunity to serve the devotees very nicely. And also, you mentioned how a person can be trained so that their senses can be purified. You mentioned 3 points. One is accepting the remnants of pure devotees, and then accepting the dust of the dust from the lotus feet of the devotee, and then accepting the water used for washing the feet of the pure devotees. Also, you explained the various pastimes, how actually Mahaprabhu exhibited during his time. So thank you, Prabhuji, for very nice class. And the devotees may please unmute their line and share any questions or reflections you may have. Are devotees able to unmute?
Yes, Prabhu, I think should be because you have enabled.
Yeah.
Okay, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. It was Dandavat Pranam Prabhuji. It was a
Hare-
wonderful class. So many analogies you have given and about the prasadam you have told was really helping us, Prabhuji, when we wanted to tell somebody why prasadam is very important, why we have to take prasadam. So these stories also we can narrate. Also, it is encouraging us also. Yes, we should always eat only prasadam. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Any other comments or questions from devotees?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams. Thanks
Hare
for the
Krishna.
wonderful class, Prabhu. Please forgive me for my ignorance. How practically to take remnants of the devotees prasadam, Prabhu?
Yeah, so that is a question. It's a very, like say, delicate question in the sense that we can always, maybe not directly from the plate, but maybe to be honest, I don't have that much realization, but definitely they from their hands we can take the plate. But actually here, because this is our conditioning that we may not be able to see that we can also take directly from the plate, but we generally take it when it is from the spiritual masters. At least I'm talking it from my perspective. When it comes to spiritual masters, we are very eager, but to take it from their plates. But from the devotees, at least we always have that hesitancy. And also, I don't know. As I said, we sing Mahaprasade Govinde Nama Brahmani Vaishnave Swalpa Punya Vratam Rajan Vishwasone Varjayate. So in that prayer itself, Swalpa Punya Vratam Rajan Vishwasone Varjayate. One who has very small amounts of pious credits, he does not have full faith in the prasadam of the Lord Brahmani Vaishnavi and also of the footsteps of the remnants of the footsteps from the Vaishnavas and also in the name. So it's basically like as we have seen in like even when I was reading the customs of Kalidasa, it looked bewildering, like how he would hide and go to the dustbins, collect it and chew the mango seeds and the skin and eat the juice and remaining juice. It's bewildering. To be honest, I don't have that realization to do that. But yes, we can practice it in a ways that is more, I would say, acceptable for us. But definitely, maybe someone else can share that realization. But definitely aspiring from the devotees, the remnants of the devotees is also the pure devotees is also spiritually potent. For spiritual masters, we don't have that hesitation, but for some, yeah, it's up to the individual level of consciousness, individual realizations, and individual faith level that one can maybe not imitate, but can follow in the footsteps. So hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
See,
Dandavat.
Prabhu, can I add one more point on this, Prabhuji?
Sure, definitely.
I think one aspect is accepting remnants from taking remnants from another devotee. We also get concurrence from the other devotee. Normally, devotee due to their humility, they don't allow to take remnants from others' plate. That is one aspect. But the other one, Prabhuji, like taking the dust from the lotus feet of the devotees. What I heard is that we should take some seva, like when we come to temple or when some event is happening. I've seen many senior devotees. They actually take the service of arranging the chapel in the stand or arranging that properly. So that is actually very service that is very purifying. That is one thing I heard. And another practical tips what I heard is that they say, when you enter into the temple, so just, we go and offer obeisances in front of the deities and in front of Prabhupada. But they said as soon as you enter into the temple premises, you should just offer obeisances because that place is, stepped by so many devotees' lotus feet. So that is another way to take the dust of the from the devotees. Because if we go and directly take, that may look too artificial, or the devotees may not accept. But we can do in this way. That's what I hear, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Prabhuji, we usually bow down to the big threshold in the entrance of the temple with that attitude only, Prabhu, to take the dust of the devotees. That
Yes,
we
Mataji.
follow. Even before we came to Krishna consciousness, we usually follow that. Hare Krishna, Dandavats.
Hare Krishna, Srivas Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful class. I think
Krishna.
one point which really struck me was we are searching for happiness elsewhere, in the wrong place. That is something, very striking. Just to make sure the right place for happiness is where, in the service of the Lord. It's something just struck me. I just want to share that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna devotees, there are no questions. We can end today's session with Vaishnava Pranam. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya
Kripa
kripa
sindhu
sindhum jayevacha
Shivacha
patitanam
patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Anantakoti Vaishnava Bhaktavrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you so much, Sri Bhagavat Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna devotees, tomorrow
Hare Krishna.
we'll meet again at 8 o'clock. We'll have visiting speaker giving class through Zoom. His Grace Muralisham Prabhu will be giving class through Zoom tomorrow morning.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Hare Krishna devotees.
Hare Krishna.